perspective, how important is it for pitchers to kind of dictate that pace and kind of control what as much as they can on the mound?
Yeah, I think within reason is one of the more important aspects of the game. I talk to our guys in the game of baseball, they're the closest thing to a quarterback is that they can dictate the tempo, they can dictate the pace. They are in more control than anybody else that's on the field, right? Because the hitter is reacting to you, the infielders, outfielders, they're all reacting to the ball put in play, and so the pitcher is able to dictate a lot of that. Of if they're pounding the strike zone, how quickly they're working in between pitches, how much do they own that 10 seconds in between each pitch, and so that's where for us. I feel like the 20-second clock, when it came into play, it didn't have a great effect on us, except for in the conference tournament this past year. But for us, it's a big part of our philosophy and kind of how we go about our work each day is that we want to make the hitters obviously uncomfortable when they're in the box, push the pace, and fill up the strike zone for sure.
Zach, you obviously pitched a lot last year, but kind of getting into that starter mentality, do you think he's well equipped for that, kind of a big game type of pitcher? And how has it been like stretching him out to be ready for that role?
Yeah, I think that was really the thing you noticed first about Zach was that he is certainly a guy that's able to step up in those situations. Never really shied away from it. I think about we brought him in to close out that game on Friday night against North Carolina last year, and of course on opening day he's the first guy out of the bullpen, and so he got thrown to the wolves a little bit there at the beginning, but he handled it, and you start watching him, and the bigger the moment is, the better he is, the better his stuff is, and so that those are things within a pitcher, the intangibles. Those are the things that you look for in a great starting pitcher or anything like that. And then, of course, from then till now, he's done an outstanding job of physically getting stronger, working his tail off. We addressed some things as far as his off-speed pitches, his breaking ball, his cutter, different things like that to go along with already his fastball and changeup, which are really good pitches. And so excited to see how he continues to handle his business over the next several weeks, and excited for him for sure.
Coach, how do you, with the long grind of the baseball season, how do you prepare your pitchers to try to prevent as many injuries as possible?
Yeah, I think you just got to be as proactive about it as soon as they get to school in August as you possibly can, because you're not. I mean, you're preparing for it in fall baseball and early in the spring, but pitch counts aren't going to be up as much because you're building them up slowly. And same with relief appearances and throwing them multiple times in a week and different things like that. And so the same stimulus that they feel at the end of a season is not going to be replicated in the fall or the early spring. And so I think you just have to educate them to the best of your ability, and then kind of get in there early and assess some weaknesses of theirs, what they do well. How can we build these weaknesses into strengths, whether that's physically with the way they move or just their physical strength in general, and then get an understanding of how they bounce back. What does their throwing need to look like in between outings? All of those things really play a role in figuring those things out, and then just working really, really hard in the weight room and consistently getting in to see our trainer, Logan, who does an outstanding job with our pitchers. But just being proactive about everything, right? No need is too small or too big, right? Just get in there, get the work that you need done, and just communicate extremely well. But it's just different for every single pitcher in our organization. Really, it's like everybody responds differently to different things. Some guys, they're more sore on the second day, some guys are sore on the first day, some guys don't get sore at all, right? And so it's more about catering their throwing around each guy instead of just forming it into where everybody is doing the same thing.
If you had to describe this bullpen in one word, what would it be and why?
In one word, that's interesting. I hope tough, right? Like just tough. I got a bunch of guys who are able to take the ball and go finish games and go attack the opponent and things like that. But I think what you're going to look at is you're going to have some variety in the bullpen as well, where guys look different. There's different arm slots. There's different pitch mixes. And I think, with the staff and with the team, you're always wanting that word to be tough, right? And so if we have a good variety of different mix from the bullpen aspect, and you also have a bunch of guys who have been in the moment and are tough and can handle the situation, I think you look at a bullpen that can be very successful.
When you look at making that decision on who the Sunday starter is going to be, how do you balance from who's going to be the best guy on Sunday, balancing with where you might lose him on Friday or Saturday in
Right.
big time situations?
Yeah, no, and that's a big piece of it. We talked about Trey last year is just how good he was out of the bullpen, moving him into a starting role, and so it just depends on the supporting cast around you and who emerges as the spring goes on. And so you certainly want to have some of your best arms in the bullpen to finish games, right? You don't want to ever leave that up to chance, and so I think that in determining that, you just got to figure out if you have enough on the back end to go finish game that have experience and that have been in those scenarios before in those situations, and then dictate if someone needs to start on Sunday or who needs to start in the midweek or all those things, And so that's kind of we'll work through that in the next couple weeks when it comes to Jake Hunter and Wyatt Lunsford Shinkman and all those guys, and really get a good feel on what the bullpen looks like if this guy is starting versus if this guy is starting.
You mentioned Trey. You said it's just obviously an awesome season last year, awesome summer, awesome fall, and a lot of expectations on him. What have you seen out of him as he's getting ready to kind of grab the number one spot last year, so to be that number one guy again?
Yeah, I think, all the positives start with Trey just being an awesome human being and an extremely hard worker and very diligent. And so it all starts there in that he came back here and he was like a man on a mission and a guy that's working his tail off and not wanting to leave anything to chance. And he's bringing his teammates along with him. And so I think he's more physically prepared than he's ever been. He's definitely more mentally prepared. And it's just been about sharpening up the tools in his tool set at this point, with all of his stuff. And so he's in a really good place right now. He threw the ball outstanding this weekend and has thrown the ball outstanding the whole spring and obviously in the fall as well. And so the thing that I'm most proud about him is that he's a great teammate. He works extremely hard and he makes people around him better. And so excited for him for sure.
With the bullpen, who has turned your head and pleasantly surprised you throughout fall ball?
Yeah, I don't know if surprised would be the right word. I have pretty high expectations for these guys who have been in our program for a while, certainly. But Wyatt Lunsford Shankman looks tremendous up until this point. He's really gotten a lot better and just more honed in on the things that he needed to, and has been outstanding. Jake Hunter threw the ball as good as anybody this past weekend. The stuff's better. He's a guy that's been in the fire a lot. Jaden Winters, another guy. I know Coach mentioned him earlier, but big physical frame, some really good stuff to go along with it, and he's gotten a lot better with his secondary pitches as well. Throws a ton of strikes. Eric Ritchie probably has as much swing and miss potential out of his pitches as anybody on our staff. This past fall he struck out 2 guys per inning. And so those guys have certainly taken a step forward. I think from a transfer situation, you got guys like Aaron Groller, who is a left-hander and a low slot mix guy and really fills up the strike zone. Drew Bryan is a guy that I think could come in and blow it out for 1 to 2 innings with some pretty good stuff. And so I think, like anything, a lot of this stuff will emerge as we go in the spring. But I think there's certainly a lot of choices and a lot of weapons that you have to go and use in a lot of different roles.
A couple of ECU hitters told me they see opposing pitchers tip pitches quite often. How do you go about avoiding that with your guys? Is that something that maybe you got to work on more?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we practice it nearly every day in some capacity. Whether that's in our throwing programs, challenge our partners of the guys that are throwing with each other. Just see if you can pick up on anything, and then we do a lot of just shadow work where guys are getting signs and working through their grips and doing different things, and someone just sitting there watching them to see if they have any tells. And then every pitch that is thrown, whether it's in a bullpen or on the field live, is videoed, and so it's things that we can go through and review and just make sure that we're taking care of the details. As we tell our guys, we don't want the reason that you're unsuccessful is because you're tipping pitches or giving away what you're throwing. And so it's something that we just actively build into our practice plans and into our throwing programs to make sure that that we're taking care of all the small things.
In the offseason, you lost a couple veteran guys who've been here for a while, Garrett Saylor, Carter Spot.
Mm-hmm.
What's the transition kind of been like, not just on the field, but off the field in that bullpen, leadership-wise? Who's kind of stepped up in that place, and how do you feel without them now?
Yeah, I think those guys for a program, for a team, they're guys that you miss, of course, right? Because they've been here for 5 years and they held a special place in all of our hearts and did a tremendous job within our program and with our players. But luckily, as we've said already, is that we have a really good junior class, and then you've got a guy like Danny Bill, who's a senior, has been here for a long time, and that junior class, in my opinion, from a leadership perspective, is one of the best that we've had here in quite some time. With Trey Savage, Wyatt Lunsford, Shinkman, Jake Hunter, Eric Ritchie, Jaden Winter, obviously already mentioned Danny, and those guys just know what it takes. And of course, they're very talented, but the best thing about them is that they care about the people around them and they want them to get better, and they're not so worried about their feelings. And so what I mean by that is they're not so worried about, correcting somebody or trying to help them get better and someone getting sensitive about it, right? And so we're certainly lucky to have guys who have stayed through our program and, taken value in all the things that Coach Godwin has talked about, all the things that we have preached over time, and they go out and they live it every single day.
What do you see in Danny Beal, and how does he fit into that mix that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think you could see Danny in a very similar role as what you saw last year. I think, he's the guy, maybe the most valuable guy on our staff, in that he can do a lot of different things for you. He can long relieve, he can close a game, he can short relieve, he can start for you if you really need him to, right? And so I think with Danny, he's a guy that has taken his success from last year and he has bloomed it into another level. So I think he's just a better version of what he was last year. And he's been a tremendous leader for our young guys, and he's a guy that guys lean on because he can help guide them through. With Danny, it wasn't easy for him early on in his career, and so whenever you see freshmen who are struggling and things like that, Danny's a guy that can bring them aside and kind of just help them understand that, hey, your best days are ahead of you. But he's definitely a big time vital piece of the bullpen this year moving forward for sure.
Coach, as far as the midweek is concerned, are there guys that stand out right now that will start with a lot of in-state rivalries and stuff?
Whoever the best arm available is, whoever that might be. I think that's the piece of it, and as much as I'd love to have 5 starters who all threw 8 innings and we only had to use 3 or 4 bullpen arms, the reality of it is you don't want to lose a game because you don't use your best guy, right? And that can be on Sunday, that can be on Saturday, that can be on Friday, that can be on Tuesday, it can be on Wednesday. It doesn't really matter because they're all important. And so we kind of will assess as we get through the weekend and see where we're at from how guys are feeling, and we'll assess who the best matchup is against the team that's ahead of us, and whoever that is, we'll get the ball and we'll roll with him from there, right? But of course, I don't think you can ever just say, hey, this is going to be your midweek starter. It evolved last year where Zach Root was that for a little bit, and then he went into the weekend rotation, and then Garrett. I mean, going into last year, nobody in this room would have guessed that Garrett Saylor was going to be our midweek starter at the end of the year, and one of our better starters for the entire season. Nobody would have guessed that because of 22, where he started at the beginning of the year, and we had to take him out after the second weekend or whatever, right? And so this is one of those things. Baseball is very unpredictable, right? And that's the beauty of it. And so hopefully, as we go, we'll let the game give us the answers to those type of things.